We know that losing LeVeon Moss for the year is a big loss. But the question is, how big of a loss is it for the Aggies?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. On the show today, we're going to talk a little bit about why, I'd like to get some of the main guys out of the game as early as possible against New Mexico State. We're going to talk about what positions we got to add and we need to look to add in the offseason. But first, we're going to start the show talking about this. Losing LeVeon Moss, here's what led to this conversation. I was sitting this morning and thinking to myself, and I said, man, obviously I talked about how much of a loss LeVeon Moss is for this team, but I don't know if I quite explained, in my opinion, how big of a loss this is. And, I think there's some spots where Texas A&M is extremely fortunate when it comes to depth and when it comes to solid backups and solid players. And running back's one of those positions. And that is why I don't think I was all that crazy, super concerned when Moss went down, because my thought is, okay, this hurts, but you still got some solid guys. Now I've thought more about it. I've sat and let this really sink in, and this is a problem, ladies and gentlemen. This really is a problem. And I don't think it's really an Amari Daniels problem. It's are we believers in E.J. Smith? And then, goodness gracious, you get one more injury. What do you do now? You've lost Ruben Owens for the year. You've lost LeVeon Moss for the year. You're now down to Amari Daniels and E.J. Smith. After that, we've talked about it. Do you make the move to Terry Bussey? Do you do something? Where do you go from there? And, I think that this is awful, awful concerning to me, because I look at this running back room for Texas A&M, and I said to myself, okay, you were in a good spot heading into the season. Then it got a little worse when you lose Ruben Owens. Then it got a little bit worse when you lost LeVeon Moss. And now I originally thought that the drop-off from Ruben Owens to Moss, I thought there was going to be just the most narrow drop-off you've ever seen. And once again, there could have been. We haven't seen year 2 Ruben Owens, obviously. But, I don't think there was much of a drop-off. I think that LeVeon Moss was one of the better running backs in the SEC. He had a great season. He was on pace. Let's see what he would have hit 1,000, right? Let's see what he would have hit. LeVeon Moss has 765 yards on the year, and he played a couple of snaps in the South Carolina game before the injury. So that means he would have the rest of the South Carolina game, New Mexico State, Auburn, and Texas. He would have easily gotten over the 1,000-yard mark. So you would have had an 1,000-yard rusher. Now, Amari Daniels is a guy, though, you're in a good spot here. Amari Daniels does have 466 yards on the ground on the year on 94 carries. He's averaging 5 yards a carry, which is not as good as LeVeon Moss's 6.3 yards per carry, but 5 yards a carry is not a terrible number. It's a number where we can live with. We can deal with 5 yards per carry. So I think then expanding this further and looking at the future, I think it's definitely a drop-off to me from Moss to Daniels. I think that we have some serious Amari Daniels lovers in the comments when it comes to people who just think, I think Amari Daniels is a good player. I don't want this to come off like I think he's bad. I think we're in trouble. I just think that LeVeon Moss is really good. I think he's really good. So I think that there's a drop-off. And the goal is for that drop-off to not be substantial, maybe even not be noticeable. That would be ideal, is if this drop-off just proved, hey, it's really a non-issue. It wasn't as bad as we thought. Everything's going to be fine. Obviously, you would have liked to have had LeVeon Moss out there, but Amari Daniels has been really good, and he's really looked good, and that could happen. But my point is, I think like I said, I thought there was going to be heading into the season. I thought that Reuben Owens was going to be RB1, but by a real narrow margin. I thought it was going to be, I talked about it like I thought it was 50.5 and 49.5 when it came to Reuben Owens and LeVeon Moss. I liked both of them. I mean, we're talking just a little barely below. I think that gap between LeVeon Moss and Amari Daniels is wider. I think it's more 60-40, maybe you could talk me into 55-45. But I do believe that there is a drop off from Moss to Daniels. You know, I try to be as positive when I can be. And so the positive take to losing LeVeon Moss for the year is Texas A&M is in a fortunate situation to have a lot of talented backs. But the realistic view to this, in my opinion, is Texas A&M is in trouble because they are losing a valuable offensive weapon. And the guy that is, the backup, even though this is more of a kind of a two-headed monster, but we'll say the backup, I think he's a good player, but I don't think he's as good as LeVeon Moss. Once again, I think LeVeon Moss is right up there with the Jarquez Hunters. I think Rocket Sanders is a great running back. I think he was right up there with some of the best running backs in this conference. And now he is, done for the year, and that's going to hurt you a little bit. So looking at this, at the future here, I think Daniels, we've talked about it, ladies and gentlemen. There's still some special things on the table for Texas A&M when it comes to an SEC championship game, when it comes to a college football playoff appearance. There are a lot of special opportunities left on the table for this football team. The question then becomes, what are you going to be able to do now without your two main running backs? You're getting deeper into this room, and on a team that wants to run the football a lot, a team that, once again, this team's thrown the football 218 times. They've run it 376 times. The Aggies are looking to run the football. And now you're running the football, with running backs that are not as good as your main guys. And I think they're still good players. And once again, that is the positive look here. The positive look is, well, we're talking about your third string running back, and it's a guy named Amari Daniels who's a darn good back. That's true. Amari Daniels is a great running back, but he's not as good as LeVeon Moss. And then I just can't get any kind of read on EJ Smith yet. On the year, he's got 33 carries for 107 yards. That's 3.2 yards per carry. His long carry on the year is 14 yards. And 33 carries, I think, is enough of a sample size to start to get a feeling on a player. And that's just, that's just not a great yards per carry number. So that's where my concern comes from. If Amari Daniels needs a breather for 2 or 3 snaps, is EJ Smith going to be fine? Like, is he going to be a guy that can come in and really give you quality reps and quality snaps, and quality rushes and improve this yards per carry? That's where the concern lies to me more. I think the drop off from Moss to Daniels is a somewhat significant gap, but I think the drop off from Daniels to Smith as of right now, and I'd love to be proved wrong, is an even wider gap. That is where the concern lies to me, is I just think that there's a substantial gap there. So it's interesting. It's something to look at. It's something to monitor. It's something that we've got to figure out. This is interesting. I just noticed this. Marcel Reed has completed 63 of 109 passes, and Connor Rigman has completed 62 of 109 passes. That's funny. That percentages are off bare. That's interesting. I just now noticed that. There you go. But that's actually something to discuss more in and of itself, but not today. So to me, I think if you're this coaching staff, you feel good that you still have Amari Daniels. The question is, when he needs a breather, when he needs a rest, can EJ Smith give you some quality carry, snaps, reps? That's the question. So yes, I try and be positive as much as I can, ladies and gentlemen, but at the end of the day, this is a tough loss, and it's hard to grasp positives from losing LeVeon Moss for the year, because he's, I think, one of the best backs in the SEC. We're going to talk a little bit about where Texas A&M needs to go in the portal, and we'll have that conversation coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. First, I got to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Lots of fun stuff to bet on. Hit a bet last night on FanDuel in the Lions-Texans game. Great game tonight between the Dolphins and the Rams. Should be a fun one. Should be hopefully a lot of offense in that one, especially for my fantasy football teams. Never waste a hunch and make everyone more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. So, I know there's going to be some that are going to hear this topic and go, why are we talking about the transfer portal? Why are we? And if you feel that way, I want to explain to you why I wanted to talk about this. First of all, you have to understand this is, you play New Mexico State, you play Auburn, you play Texas, and then you got a bowl game, and then we're looking at portal stuff, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is serious. This is coming up. This is not a joke. And it's something that the staff mentally has to be preparing for right now. So looking at this, to me, and what we talked about on Friday was wide receiver. So obviously the number one thing on my list I think you have got to get in the portal is a wide receiver. So I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about receiver. I mean, I'll talk about it here for a second. I mean, I think that you have a lot of good receivers. You have a lot of good receivers. You need a great receiver. On Friday, I gave the example of that kid that we were after, Lambert Smith from Penn State, and he ends up going to Auburn. And we're thinking, well, who cares? We got these guys. And then he ends up being insane at Auburn. I mean, I was talking to Locked On Auburn host Zach Lockerbie. I think that he's going to have one of the best Auburn receiver seasons we've seen in a long time. And he could have been your guy at Texas A&M. And I know that the Aggies aren't a team that want to throw the football a ton. I mean, once again, they're out here. They want to run the ball. And that makes it a little bit harder to go get a really dominant wide receiver from the portal. But at the end of the day, you've got to go get somebody. You got to go get a guy. And one of the often off-season conversations in college football right now is the $1 million quarterback. Texas A&M isn't going to need the $1 million quarterback. They're going to have a 5-star coming in. They're going to have Marcel Reed back. We'll see what happens with Wigman. I mean, you're not going to need the $1 million quarterback. You're not going to need the $1 million running back, I don't think. You'll have a lot of talent back in that position group. You got a great running back coming in your recruiting class. You don't need the $1 million running back or $1 million quarterback. And I think that those positions are where people spend the most money. Maybe a dominant pass rusher, there's some money to be spent there as well, like when it comes to how expensive they are in the portal and stuff like that. I mean, and that's it's sad. To me, it's a little sad that we're talking about this in college football. It's great these players are getting paid and all that, but I mean, it is tough to talk about, like, we got to go pay $1 million quarterback. We got to go invest in $1 million receiver. Like, that's just, it's weird to talk about it that way, but that's the reality. It's the world we live in. So receiver, to me, number one, have to go get a guy. Go get a guy that can give you 1,000 yards, even in this system. Go give a guy that can be open all the time for your quarterbacks. Go get a guy like that. You have a lot of wide receiver 2s on your roster right now. You need a wide receiver 1 to accompany those wide receiver 2s. Your receiver room's great. If you go get a wide receiver 1, you've got so many good wide receiver 2s. You got to go get a wide receiver 1 to balance those guys out. The next thing I have here is tight end. The sad reality, folks, is, I mean, and Watson has been fine and all that, but I think you need Coach Klein. I think that he wants to use tight end more than he's been using it. I really do. I think that that's a position group that he's wanting to use more, and he's just not using it a ton. So looking at that, I think that it's a position group. Another spot where you could go get a dominant guy. I mean, I think you've got a lot of solid guys to help a room. A lot of, and I think that we were hoping, and maybe could Donovan Green get back to being healthy and come and be that guy? Maybe. I don't know. I still don't think he's gotten back to 100%. But point is this. I think that you've got in the position groups we're talking about, you've got a lot of good players, a lot of maybe even great players. What you need to go get is an elite player in these rooms. So an elite tight end, you only need one. You have a lot of those secondary guys who can come in and block and all that. You need an elite receiver. You need an elite tight end. Offensive line I have down here too, because I just think you can never have enough offensive linemen. And I mean, I think like an Armaj Reed Adams, what a great addition in the portal. I mean, he's just been really good. Obviously, there's been some penalties there, but he's been great. You've got to hit offensive line out of the park in the portal, and I think that they're going to do that. I don't think you need a ton there. I think that you've got, that's going to be one where you have to kind of wait and see what decisions some players make, because you've got some talent there. And you've got some talent with some eligibility left. But I bet they end up adding a couple portal linemen. The next I have some defensive line. Scorton's gone. You're going to lose a lot of your talented defensive linemen to the NFL, to eligibility. You're going to lose some defensive linemen. You're going to need a couple defensive linemen, and it's not going to be easy to find the next Nick Scorton. It's not going to be simple to do that. But if you could find a dominant defensive lineman, that would be extremely, extremely helpful in this game. I think if you could find a couple defensive linemen to come in and just dominate, that'd be great in the portal. And then I have linebacker, question mark. The reason I say that is just because you have so many young guys on this roster that have a ton of upside. I don't know if linebacker is a position you need to go get help on. That's the one to me that's a question mark. And it was funny. You look at corner, you look at safety, Ratcliffe, you feel good about the future there. You feel good about the future with Will Lee. You got a lot of talent in the secondary. I feel pretty confident in the secondary. I mean, here's the deal. They might add a guy or two, but what I'm saying is I'm not looking at the secondary going, you have got to go bring some guys in the secondary or we are in serious, serious trouble. That's not the case. So to me, it's now looking at the position where I think you have to add, I'd say tight end to wide receiver. I feel good. Offensive line, I think you don't necessarily have to. They will. You don't necessarily have to. I feel fine about quarterback, running back, secondary. Those positions feel great about. It's just receiver, tight end, offensive line, D-line, and maybe linebackers. I think those are the positions you got to add a couple players. What I'm saying is the point of all this is they're going to use the portal. They're going to utilize it well. Then you also have the players on the current roster. They're going to transfer out. That's going to happen. That will change our opinions. Maybe some of these young linebackers that we really like transfer out. And you go, okay, well, now we need a linebacker. The people transferring out affect people transferring in. So we'll have to see what happens when the portal opens. But there's definitely a few ways that the coaching staff can make this roster a lot better quickly this offseason with the transfer portal. The good news is I think it's going to be a lot easier to do that with this roster than it is it's going to be a lot easier to do that with this current roster than it would have been to do that with what you had last year, knowing you had so much turnover. It's going to be a pretty simple transition, in my opinion, for in the portal this offseason for this coaching staff. I think they know what they need. They don't need a ton. It's not going to be crazy stressful, which is exciting. We're going to talk about why I think the goal needs to be to get these players out as quickly as you possibly can against New Mexico State. And we'll have that conversation coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I'll tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the only place anyone should ever be buying tickets to anything. My dad and I are going to a concert tomorrow, right? Where do we get our tickets? Game Time. If you're going to a sporting event, if you're going to see theater, if you're going to see a comedian, whatever you're going to see, the only place you should be doing that is on the Game Time app. I love the Game Time app. It's so simple to use. They have the best prices. I love the feature of you can see what your seat looks like from the app before you buy your ticket. It's such a great feature. This is the best and only place I will ever. It's the best place to buy tickets, only place I'll ever buy tickets, and I highly recommend y'all doing the same. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So my last thought here when it comes to this game against New Mexico State, I'm looking at this game. I don't like games like this, and I'll tell you, and obviously you got to play them. You have to play your non-conference games. I get that, but I mean, you should beat this team handsomely. I mean, it shouldn't be. Diego Pavia is gone. They're not playing Auburn the way they're going to, you know what I mean? Sorry, Auburn people. That was a little unnecessary shade. But point is, looking at this game to me, the goal needs to be to stay healthy. You gain nothing from this game. It reminds me of baseball when you're getting ready for the tournaments and the postseason and stuff, and you have a game against some random small Division I school. Obviously, it's a lot easier to lose a game in baseball than it is in football. Any random no-name team can come win. It's baseball. There's a lot more parity. Point of this conversation is those games hurt you more than they help you. This game can hurt you. This game's going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. I mean, that's just the reality. It's just I'm not worried about you losing the game, but I'm worried about getting banged up. And you've got 2 games that will decide your season after this. On the road against Auburn and Texas at home. You win out. It's very simple. And now the scenario, the picture's clear. We'll talk about this more tomorrow probably. But if you win out, you're in the SEC championship game. So that's there. The goal needs to be to stay healthy and not get banged up against New Mexico State in a game where, like I said, you have nothing, absolutely nothing to gain. You only have stuff to lose. You've got to find a way to stay healthy in this game. And that's why you get up 24-0, 27-0, whatever. If you get up, get your guys out. I just think there's no reason to get your guys banged up in this game against New Mexico State. The goal here needs to be to stay as healthy as possible. We'll break down the game throughout the week, but it's funny. I was sitting here this morning thinking, well, how should I break this game down? What should we talk about? What is there to discuss that's like relevant to the rest of the season? All that. That's what was in my head. And then, of course, my only thought is, I think the only thing to break down is don't get hurt in this game. You cannot get banged up in this game against New Mexico State because, if you lose an important player, it's just going to hurt you. You've already lost, a main part of your offense. You've lost some players throughout the season. This is a spot where you don't want to lose a player against a team like New Mexico State. The goal needs to be to stay healthy. The goal needs to be to get yourself ready to rock and roll for the Auburn and Texas games because you're going to need a full, healthy roster for those 2 football games. So this is definitely something that I am monitoring. That I'll be monitoring the game as soon as you get a lead that it looks like the game is over, completely out of control. Get your guys out of there. Rest them up, no bangs and bruises, get everybody healthy for the matchup with Auburn. And then, of course, following that, the massive, massive game against the Texas Longhorns, which should be, assuming Texas takes care of business and A&M takes care of business against Auburn and New Mexico State, that game should be for an SEC championship appearance and probably a college football playoff appearance. So it's going to be it's going to be a fun end of the season for this football team. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you all so much for being here every single day. I really, really appreciate it. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, helps the show a lot. Hit the like button on YouTube, helps the show a lot as well. And then if you're listening on a podcast platform, leave a 5-star review, subscribe and like there as well. It helps the show a ton as well. Really appreciate it. Hope everyone has an outstanding rest of their Monday. Enjoy some Monday Night Football, and we will see you tomorrow right here on Locked On Aggies.